Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A very good morning, a very good afternoon, a very good evening, depending on which part of the world you're joining us from. Welcome to the 7th virtual panel of the In Conversation with CLIX series, organized this time under the theme of governance in times of uncertainty, rethinking governance in times of uncertainty. For those of you who may be joining us for the very first time or who I may not have had the chance to meet in the past, I'm Dr. Nariman Haj Hamou, and I'm the founder and the CEO of the Center for Learning Innovations and Customized Knowledge Solution, CLIX. Just to give you some brief background about CLIX, CLIX was launched in 2012 as to support capacity building within the higher education sector through the provision of training and consultancy services in our 5 areas of expertise. We actually specialize in leadership development and governance, in quality assurance and accreditation, strategy development, innovation in learning and teaching, and that includes different forms of technology integration and research. Over the last almost 9 years, we have had the privilege to work with more than 140 universities and colleges, and actually several organizations, associations, and ministries of higher education. We have also trained over 9,000 members of our community, from members of governing boards and presidents of universities to people working in quality, faculty member, staff working in student services, and so forth. In addition, throughout the years, we have strived to establish different platforms and networks where we could bring in different stakeholders of the higher education sector together to discuss key areas of concerns and to establish long-standing partnership. To that extent, we have launched in 2013 the MENA Higher Education Leadership Forum, and we have launched the MENA Association of University Presidents in partnership with the Arab Association of Universities. We have also launched the Voice of Higher Education and this series of panels, among other initiatives that the center has launched. This series of panels started last June as to provide in-depth discussion and insights around how the sector may effectively navigate through these times of uncertainty and turbulence, and plan not just to survive the pandemic, but also plan for the new normal. In specific, this particular panel on governance in the era of the pandemic is in line with the sector's continuous efforts to try and attempt to build agility and resilience and to quickly adapt to unprecedented rapid changes that have been caused by the pandemic. We are hoping to highlight how university governance arrangements can support universities becoming more agile, more resilient, and continue to be relevant and meet the demands of the new normal. We are hoping to get additional colleagues joining us, but we should expect to have participants from 48 countries. We're also broadcasting on the Voice of Higher Education and on our YouTube channel. Before I start introducing our panel chair for today, I would like to kindly remind our participants that they can interact and ask their questions to the panelists using the question and answer feature in Zoom. Please do abstain from using the chat for questions, as it would be very difficult for us to look at both the chat and the Q&A section. We will try towards the end of the session to take as many questions as possible. Now, without any further delay, I would like to introduce our chair for today, Professor Mohammed Zairi. Professor Mohammed Zairi is one of the leading international experts in the field of total quality management and excellence, who has influenced management thinking for over 35 years. He brings along with him rich experience in academic, government, and private sectors. He has, over the years throughout his career, served on numerous boards from both the industry and the academic sector. Currently, Professor Zairi is a senior advisor to the Prime Minister's office at the UAE government. He is also the chairman of the jury of Abu Dhabi Government Excellence Program, Dubai Excellence Program, and Sheikh Khalifa Government Excellence Program. He was one of the co-founders of the first e-learning university in the region, the Hamdan bin Mohammed Smart University. Professor Zairi has published over 70 books and has over 400 papers to his name. He has been the founder of several international journals, and his latest focus is on quality in the digital era, and is one of the originators of the concept of Quality 4.0. Prof. Zairi has received several international awards and recognition for his unique contribution, including the Lancaster Medal, the Grand Medal from the American Association of Quality, the Ishikawa Harrington Medal from the Asia Pacific Quality Organization, the Yoshio Kondo Medal from the International Academy of Quality, and the Lifetime Achievement Medal from the Australian Quality Organization, among others. I would spend the entire day reading his CV if I actually had to do that. So excuse me, Prof. Zairi, for being very brief on your profile. Prof. Zairi, I would like to hand over the floor to you so that you can introduce our esteemed panel members, and I will see you towards the end of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nariman. Welcome, dear friends and esteemed colleagues, and welcome to our audience. We hope that this important session is going to be stimulating, fruitful, and inspiring as the whole sector of higher education is encountering unprecedented challenges. And I think the title of our panel discussion is big enough, clear enough to indicate what we are going to be faced in the future. And I think that just for my colleagues and also for the audience, there are two words that are significant in the title of the panel discussion. One is the art of rethinking, and also the word uncertainty. So I would just like to say a few words before I will introduce the panel, that the time of uncertainty is a reality. We haven't seen anything like this before, at least on a global basis. Every country feels the pain. Every government is lost about what to do. And as the pandemic continues to ravage society and destroy the economies, the national economies, I think the uncertainty will pull us even deeper into an uncertain future and a dark future, so to speak. But having said that, I just would like to say two words, and I think there is one powerful quote from John Paulus. He said, "Uncertainty, the only certainty there is, and knowing how to live with insecurity is the only security." So I think Dr. Nariman mentioned in her opening remarks about learning to be resilient, learning to adapt to these conditions is important, at least for the near future. One recent event took place in London, facilitated by PA Consulting, and it was trying to gauge the views of leaders of universities to precisely discuss the unprecedented complexity and the uncertainty. And the facilitator on that day, Mr. Paul Woodgate, who is a higher education leader for PA Consulting, said, "The pace of change is unprecedented and we can't predict what will happen in the future. So how can we plan for making decisions in the absence of uncertainty?" And to round up the event and collecting the views of various academic leaders, there was one important quote saying, faced with such levels of uncertainty, for institutions to do two things. First, consider their purpose and identity as the guiding star, to articulate what makes them unique, and second, to design their organization to be flexible and adaptable over time. You need to ensure you can make quick decisions, take risks in a managed way, but still within the context of your guiding strategy. I think the words there are very much what every leader has to wrestle with, and that is to be adaptable, to revisit the things that we have grown not to touch. For example, the purpose is for life. The purpose is created to guide any institution for the long term. And also, we learned to optimize. We learned to work with the confines of our business models. Universities as institutions very rarely disrupt the systems that they create, the architecture of that really manages governance, and the periphery that protects them from adverse environments, and also which really gives them the opportunity to steady the ship and build the future. So constancy for purpose, as Dr. Deming used to say, is very much about preservation and is about guiding the institution with certainty, with confidence. However, this is no longer the case. To challenge the purpose of an organization now has become a reality. Many universities will probably go under. A large number of institutions will find different ways of preserving their future by merging, collaborating, scaling down, and looking at a different model, a different identity, and a different DNA. So I just want to finish with this note of optimism. There is a nice quote from here, Prigogine, who said, "The future is uncertain, but this uncertainty is at the very heart of human creativity." So the optimism is that human ingenuity will save the day. That we can be sure of. We have seen it all over the world, manufacturing plants readapting their production lines to produce the needs of healthcare systems, whether it's protective equipment for frontline staff, whether it's to do with sanitizers, or whether it's to do with preserving life. I mean, if you look at Ford, GM, and many others, they have readapted their production lines to produce ventilators, which are so critical. So I think for our audience, at least, we can say that the challenges are real. The uncertainty is putting us, unfortunately, all in darkness. But I think that the hope is not just wishful thinking. The hope is that we have human ingenuity, which will redefine what our future is going to look like. So let me now start to introduce our esteemed panel. I will start with Mr. Harry Stephen. Harry is currently the president and CEO of the Association of Governing Boards of Universities and Colleges. And he brings significant experience in governance to the associations of governing boards by understanding what matters most to their clients and their members, and that is a deep understanding of the importance of managing governance from a top level, from a strategic perspective, to guide, to nurture, to deploy, to oversee, and to protect basically the direction of every institution. So he has a wealth of experience in terms of adding value to AGB. So amongst the key activities of Harry's role is to oversee the leadership and operations that are serving over 1,300 boards, representing over 40,000 individual trustees across more than 2,000 member institutions around the world. Harry champions the AGB's educational and advocacy work, including AGB Search, which is a wholly owned private subsidiary of AGB. Harry, in his previous roles, was involved with the National Association of Corporate Directors, NACD. He was responsible for marketing, partner relations, and board development teams, providing insights on issues that matter to board agendas. He has been associated with academic institutions for a very long time and worked, for example, with studentloans.com as Vice President of Marketing for CoStar Groups. So he was a Senior Director of Industry Marketing at Nextel Communications, and he also was Director of Marketing Communication and Business Development at LexisNexis, and as a brand manager at Kraft Foods. After graduating from the United States Naval Academy with a bachelor degree in economics, Harry served in the United States Marine Corps as an inventory officer. Subsequently, he earned an MBA from the Northwest University's Kellogg Graduate School of Management, in addition to serving as a trustee for the United States Naval Academy Foundation Academic and Scholarship Programs Board. Henry is a member of the Board of Directors for the Boulder Crest Retreat for Wounded Warriors. He was a visiting professor of American University's Kogod School of Business. Welcome to you, Henry. And I would now like to introduce Dr. Mohammed Al-Hashmi. Dr. Mohammed Al-Hashmi is currently President and Vice Chancellor of Ryerson University. He was first appointed in 2016 and reappointed to a second term, which will conclude in 2026. He's an internationally recognized researcher and accomplished academic administrator, has been key contributor to the growth and development of Ryerson over a transformational time in the university's history. He started as a Ryerson Professor of Civil Engineering since 1998. He has served in progressively senior roles, including Dean of the Faculty of Engineering and Architectural Science, and acted as Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs. As President, he has promoted the establishment of Ryerson as a global university. He navigated approvals for a new innovative law school, and he has overseen the development of Rogers Cybersecurity Catalyst, which is a national center for cybersecurity. And also he has been the catalyst for the launch of the Future Skills Center, which is a Ryerson-led consortium dedicated to helping Canadians gain the skills they will need in the future. He is a graduate of l'Université des Sciences et de la Technologie Oran in Algeria and the University de Sherbrooke. Dr. Al-Hashmi is a member of the National Research Council of Canada, a fellow of the Canadian Society for Civil Engineering, a fellow of the Canadian Academy of Engineering, and a board member of Trillium Health Partners. Welcome to you, Dr. Al-Hashmi. Professor Ahmed Bawa. Professor Ahmed Bawa is the CEO of University of South Africa until 2016. He was Vice Chancellor and Principal of Durban University of Technology. He also served as Deputy Vice Chancellor and Principal of Durban Center of the University of Natal, later to be the University of KwaZulu-Natal. At the City University of New York, he was faculty member in the Department of Physics and Astronomy at Hunter College and a member of the doctoral faculty at the Graduate Center. He was appointed Associate Provost for Curriculum Development. He holds a PhD in Theoretical Physics from Durham University in the UK. As the Program Officer for Higher Education in Africa with the Ford Foundation, he led the Foundation's African Higher Education Initiative. In this portfolio, he worked in South Africa, Namibia, Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Nigeria, Ghana, Egypt, and Palestine. He serves on a number of advisory boards, such as the South African Institute of Distance Education, the Center for the AIDS Program of Research of South Africa, and the Higher Education Support Program of the Open Society Foundation. Welcome to you, Professor Bawa. And lastly, but not least, Professor Riyad Hamza. Professor Riyad Hamza is President of the University of Bahrain, Kingdom of Bahrain, and he held this position since 2016. He holds a PhD in biochemistry from the University of Houston, USA, and is a professor of biotechnology. He has served as Secretary General for the Higher Education of the Kingdom of Bahrain from the period 2011 to 2016. Professor Hamza was involved in the establishment of the Arabian Gulf University in Kingdom of Bahrain from inception, having also served as Vice President from 1994 to 2005. Professor Hamza served as Editor-in-Chief of the Arab Gulf Journal of Scientific Research and is a member of the World Academy of Sciences based in Trieste, Italy. He is founding member and member of the Board of Trustees of the Arab Forum for Environment and Development in Beirut, Lebanon. In 2011, His Majesty King Hamad bin Isa Al Khalifa, King of Bahrain, awarded Professor Hamza the Distinctive Medal, First Degree. Professor Hamza has participated in many international, regional, and national conferences. Welcome to you, Professor Hamza. Welcome to everybody. Excuse me. What I would like to do now is start to set the scene for our audience by preparing the agenda for our discussion and also for the engagement of our audience. Insofar as the questions are concerned, we have prepared 4 questions that address the structure that CLIX has delegated the responsibility to us to basically tackle. And also we get on this. And then I will ask questions on behalf of this panel is to look at the range of challenges that are raised by COVID-19 insofar as governance is concerned, whether it's from a systems perspective or whether from its implementation at an institutional level. And to do so in terms of the reaction to COVID and also the continuation beyond COVID. So I would like to ask the first question to Harry Stever and Professor Bawa, but I'll start with Harry, if that's okay. And the question is really about the systems challenge. So if one accepts that COVID-19 caused significant disruption in all aspects of higher education institutions functioning, what was the effect, for instance, on the role of leaders, the decision-making process, and the execution of existing strategic plans? In about 3 minutes or so, please, Harry.
Sure, thank you so much. And first of all, I recognize that folks around the world are experiencing their individual and collective challenges, and I wish you the best. And I know everybody's got their unique challenges, no doubt about it. Regarding your question, Professor Zari, number one, in the so the AGB membership is probably 80% US and 20% elsewhere around the world. And what is interesting is that regardless of where our members may be, the reaction from governing boards has been very well aligned. So my response is not a US, it is a global perspective. Number one, during crises, boards need to use, as I use the word, step it up. Because typically when selection committees from the board were hiring the president and some of their leadership team members for their roles, typically crisis communications was not a skill set or experience that they were hiring for. Most selection committees and boards are looking for skill sets and attributes such as academic quality, program diversity, recruitment of esteemed talent, and retention of talent. So things of that nature, things that are core to the hundreds of years of our institutions around the world being, quote unquote, successful. Well, when you have a global pandemic that says everybody go home, don't come to class in the historical in-person world, that costs a lot more money. It causes 3 things. One, the need for boards to serve as they are intended to serve as strategic governing boards. And I use that word intentionally in front of governing boards because strategic governing boards recognize that they are accountable, the board in aggregate, not the individual board members, but the board in aggregate is accountable for everything that happens or fails to happen within and across the campuses of a system or of a single institution. Number two is it requires the boards to work in collaboration with the president and leadership team to review and sharpen their mission and strategies. I think what's happened around the world is that many institutions have gotten a little complacent because as populations grew around the world, that means there were more and more traditionally aged kids that went to college. And that was true for decades. And when that stops happening, and it really it causes this imbalance between supply and demand. So that's the second thing, is around missions and strategies. And number three is around prioritization and in financial stress testing and sustainability. Because at the end of the day, boards are there to focus on the strategic long-term value of the institution and student success through oversight. And unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, most institutions haven't encouraged or haven't encountered massive challenges like we have right now, which requires financial stress testing. So in some cases, board members have had to overstep their traditional boundaries of shared governance to help leadership team members do things that they may not have been prepared to do, whether it's around strategic prioritization, whether it's around financial stress testing and strategy. So I know you gave me 3 minutes, Professor Zari, and thank you, but those are my kind of three things: is focus on the long term from a strategy perspective, realizing that boards are accountable. Number two is work with the board, with the leadership teams to refine the mission and strategies. And three, to prioritize resources so that you can create a world where you are around tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Henry. And I would like to extend the same question to Professor Bao.
Thank you so much, Professor Zairi, and I'd like to thank Dr. Haj Hamu for inviting me onto this panel. Clearly, at the systemic level, there are 4 or 5 things that really stand out. I mean, the one is just the idea that we had to do whatever we could to keep students and staff safe during the pandemic. That is clearly the priority and something that we had to kind of focus in on. The second was really the big challenge of dealing with the deep inequalities in South African society. I mean, and those inequalities, by the way, are both inter-institutional, between institutions, but also intra-institutional. So within universities, having deep inequalities among students. So, the third was really to try and focus in on completing the academic year. I mean, just because not being able to do that would result in kind of an absolute chaos going into the future. And then perhaps, just what Henry kind of also referred to as just this need to focus in on the short-term financial crisis, but understanding that the way in which you deal with the short-term crisis is very likely to have long-term implications, if you like. So the response at the systemic level here in South Africa anyway was for the 26 public universities to come together and decide jointly on a set of principles that we would kind of jointly adopt, like that there would be some consensus around. And then, of course, for each institution, taking into account its own context to begin to develop a kind of institutional responses to them. So at the systemic level, one of the most important challenges we faced was the idea of shifting away from a deeply competitive mode to a mode of cooperation, a mode of partnership and so on. So getting the institutions to work together and to understand that to get over this hurdle, we had to try and ensure that we pooled as much of our resources together as we could. But secondly, we also developed inter-institutional task teams on various topics that would be of importance to the whole sector. So, for example, just one task team looking at the financial crisis for the whole sector, another looking at financial dashboards that each university could use during this crisis, another looking at the kind of just the challenge of teaching and learning, looking at connectivity and because of the deep inequalities that we face. So adopting a sectoral approach to dealing with the issue of connectivity. And then finally, just I'll make the last point, and the last point was to really work constructively with government and with the private sector, especially with the mobile network operators and so on. Just opening up the channels for much stronger kind of collaboration and partnership between the different players to try and get us over this hurdle. By the way, none of these were natural to the system. We had to really, this was really in response to these deep uncertainties that had emerged there. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Bawa. Now I would like to ask the other perspective from this aim of the panel discussion, and that is the institutional challenges. The question is to Professor Hashmi and Professor Hamza, starting with Professor Hashmi. What was the effect on, the disruptive effect of COVID? What was the effect on program delivery, student experience, capacity utilization, and the management of operations, and everything associated with running the institution and all the core and support operations?
Thank you very much, and greetings everyone, including esteemed colleagues here, and thank you, Dr. Haj Hammu, for the invitation, and Dr. Zairi for the excellent introduction. It's a very important question, and I really appreciate that the concept of student experience is part of the question, which is key if we want our students to succeed. I would say the student experience within the classroom and outside the classroom is really key. At our university, Ryerson University, we're very well known for our student support. In a national ranking of Canadian universities by Maclean's magazine, we are consistently ranked #1 in this aspect of university life. So for us, this is something that is extremely important. We're talking about the time of pandemic. It was a priority for us to not only move all operations almost entirely online, and to ensure only essential workers remained on campus to deliver operations, but to do so in a way that reflected the university's values and priorities. Faculty and staff were very quick to respond to this switch, and I'm sure this is the case for other institutions. We decided to move to remote teaching and learning, or online teaching and learning mode. It was on Friday, middle of the day, 13th of March, and by Monday, March 16th, everything was up and running. So actually, this is exactly in line what Professor Zairi mentioned, the importance of being flexible and adaptable. I think that's key in this case. And the pandemic has actually pushed us to do those things. So I would say pandemic has brought to us a lot of challenges, but out of those challenges, we see many opportunities. Our in our university, we have two governing bodies, and you will see me today talking about both because it's important. And the alignment here is also key. So we have our board of governors, but also we have our Senate that is dealing with our academic affairs. So our Senate made changes to many policies to respond to these new needs, offering more flexibility in course choices and grading systems. I think that was key for our Senate to respond. Usually, you know, in the Canadian system and the North American system, and I would say every system, it takes time to change things. But because of the pandemic, I give credit to our community for really responding with care, because you have to make sure that you take care of the students. And that was actually a very good response. We also knew that we needed to provide additional support for students and for faculty so that they could adjust to this virtual online environment. And we also needed to reshape our student services to fit a virtual mode. The pandemic caused us to shift to creatively developing a sense of community and belonging. And I think that's an important aspect mentioned here by Professor Baya. Inequalities exist everywhere. Of course, Professor Baya is talking about the example of South Africa, but even in the most developed of the countries, you always have people who are really struggling with that. And in this case, you have to make sure to manage how you can help those students who are not necessarily in a position to access internet from everywhere. And I would say here, actually, our board has responded in a very positive way. We have a chair of our board that linked us to one of the biggest communication and media companies here. And we're able, in this case, to offer free internet services for those students who are struggling. And I would say this is part of pushing boundaries in a time of pandemic. Also, programs related to easing transition to university are also integral to online. And we have, in this case, moved all services online and made sure mental health and well-being for our students was well supported through online counseling, because with pandemic, we are also seeing that we have extra stress and pressure on our students and our faculty and our staff. And I think it's important in this case to reinforce those services. And of course, in this case, we moved all those services online. Now, I'll stop here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hashmi. And now I extend the question to Professor Hamza. Over to you, please. Professor Riyad, I think he's muted. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes,
yeah.
I'm fine.
Welcome.
Well, good afternoon to you all. First, I would like to say thank you to CLIX and Dr. Nariman for the organization of this series of webinars. I'm really honored and happy to be with such distinguished speakers. And in regards to the first questions that was asked about the effect on program delivery, student experience and capacity utilization and the management of operation. For that, I would like to focus on 4 challenges that universities has experienced. One, which we don't talk about a lot. First, which is important, of course, that's what we do. Our business is academia, but the universities also are facing challenges when it comes to finance. So there is, for example, a huge reduction in tuition fee income, mainly from, let's say, international students. There are universities where they have reductions, significant reductions on students being enrolled because of the difficulties in, let's say, travels. Also, US universities are facing a significant impact on universities' ability to generate revenue from, let's say, housing, catering, and conferences, and so on, and not just the US, everywhere. With today also economic situation, university may not be able to receive other incomes like endowment, research shares, and so on. And also, finally, some universities have significant amounts of debt due to a prior COVID investment, let's say in infrastructure and building and facilities. With the current situation, it may not be easy for the university to cover some of those debts. So the financial part also we have to address, and I'm sure universities in a lot of closed doors, officials discuss that in focus. Now, the other important thing is the institution, when it comes to institution challenges, is the decision making. Nowadays, senior management teams are asked to make difficult decisions under uncertainties where future scenarios are not predictable. These decisions may have an impact on student welfare, reputational, and finance implications. Add to that, the decision-making processes have been affected by the lockdown and work from home. Also, the absence of reliable, standardized institutional level data and macro level data in relation to higher education institutes, for example, the number of students being affected by COVID-19 and so on and so forth. This is also a challenge. The third thing that I want to say in brief too is the academic. In the beginning of the pandemic, several universities were not used to the pedagogy of online teaching, and teachers have little and or inadequate training for supporting their students at home. Also, there was an uncritical defense of face-to-face schooling with a hope to return to the old normal, which may not be possible. Here at the University of Bahrain, we didn't face this problem due to the good understanding of global processes leading to the model of virtual education. The e-learning center at the university was established in 2004, and one of the been leading centers in the region. It did not take us a long time to switch completely to the e-learning mode. Also, I want to say something about the external institutional challenges. It will take me just a minute. Universities also suffering from the impact of COVID-19 on the economy and social life. Also, technological inequalities in some countries are a real challenge. According to the UNESCO pre-pandemic data, 800 million had no computer and approximately 700 million had no internet connection. In Bahrain, we didn't face these connectivity problems, as we are the second worldwide in terms of internet penetration, with 99% in January of 2020. This is in quick. I just want to say that it is difficult to plan for uncertainties and unexpected realities. We have to learn how to adapt fast. We have to be innovative to be in this emergency mode, if you like, and we have to really walk to the future instead of letting the future come to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Hamza. We'll take a little pause now to involve our audience. Then we resume back the questions. So if we could have the question which related to the impact and the steps that are taken to address the short-term crisis caused by the pandemic on the university and on its future. There are three possible routes to answer this question. The first one is the existing model of governance, where they're perfectly suited to address the challenges. In other words, readiness was there. The second option is whether more flexibility was required and necessary than what is available in terms of the existing governance model. In other words, adaptability. And the third one is whether, in order to tackle this deep uncertainty, a new governance model is needed. So we will give a little bit of time to the audience to read through the options and basically do their vote as to what they think is the most favorable answers, and perhaps the action which is the best suited for this time of uncertainty. And in the meantime, I can just talk to my colleagues, the panel. We have 3 more questions to come. So I would appreciate your support if we can keep the answers a little bit more succinct, so that we can continue to engage the audience, because we have several questions. And also we need to open the Q&A as far as practically possible. That will be appreciated. Okay. So we have the vote. It seems that the vast majority of participants think that what exists is not perhaps suited for this challenging time, and maybe what is required, so far as governance boards are concerned, is more flexibility that are urgently required to reorganize and revamp the existing governance models in order to deal with the uncertainty. I will start with a couple of comments from the audience very briefly. Professor Hamza, what is your view on this response? What is the significance of flexibility, or do you think that the other avenues are, more preferred?
You mean flexibility is off?
I think the audience has basically nullified the notion that dealing with crisis, dealing with times of uncertainty, we can use the same approach, the same system. And also, very few people responded favorably by completely re-engineering the governance system. I think the vast majority seem to indicate that what is required is an adaptability. That's what really flexibility meant.
Well, during this crisis, when we're talking about an agile governance model, really, the university should have the capacity of systems to absorb a disturbance, recover from disruptions, and adapt to changing conditions, while retaining essentially the same function as prior to the COVID-19. We should provide leadership with clearly articulated goals and match their expectations with actions that supports identified priorities. To mitigate the risk, we need to engage the private sector in partnership, and also raise the awareness of risk to increase stakeholders' engagement in policy process and processes. The University of Bahrain, coordinating at the top level, we also try to adapt to these articulated, let's say, clearly articulated goals and match their expectations. It is very important to coordinate at the top level management to manage interests of all stakeholders, to understand or understanding complex interdependencies and vulnerabilities across the infrastructure systems to prioritize resilience efforts. Also,
sorry, because of the time, I just wanted a comment on the vote, what the audience, has voted for, has suggested. And I think I just wanted each member of the panel to say whether they are in line with the majority suggestion, or whether as leaders of academic institutions and also as seniors in governance, you would have taken a different view. So it's just that input. So can I now ask the same question to Professor Bawa?
Sorry, I had to unmute. That's the phrase of 2020. I'm so sorry. I think that it seems to me, at least, that it's a reasonable response. Universities are steeped in governance models, which kind of go back many, many years. And I suspect that what will happen as we head into the future is that we'll see kind of adjustments to those governance models, if you like. But I think it's a fairly reasonable response to say that that there was a need for much higher levels of flexibility in this period of uncertainty and so on, and that response seems to me to be quite logical.
Thank you very much, Professor Bawa. Can I ask you, Harry Stephen, your opinion, your comment on the answer?
Yes, sir. I completely agree with answer B around the need for more flexibility. As the panel has echoed, the need for flexibility expands across many different dimensions. The first of all was time. I've heard of one board, for example, here in the United States that has met 52 times since March. Now, there's not even 52 weeks since March. So when you think about the flexibility of board members who have day jobs that are separate from their volunteer roles on the boards, so that degree of flexibility is probably at the top of the list as far as from a time commitment. And then you get into the functional areas that I mentioned before around finance and strategy and prioritization, things of that nature. So I completely agree.
Thank you very much, Henry. And Dr. Hashmi, please.
I think it's a very natural response because the other options are really the two extremes. Not change everything or change everything. I think there have been many challenges to this pandemic, but key to managing the effects are staying agile and being responsive to the needs of our community. And I would totally agree with the audience on this. It's part of the role of the university really to respond to the needs of the community and also to the needs of society. And I think offering that flexibility is the natural response.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hashmi. And now we move on to our second broad aim, which is asking us the question as to the characteristics which constitute, if you like, the DNA of a responsive model of governance that can help institutions of higher learning become agile and tackle these type of unprecedented challenges with confidence. So the focus is very much on this aspect, and the aim was split into two sub-questions. The first one I will ask Professor Hamza and Harry Stephen is very much about the aspect that relates to characteristics of agility, or what we have referred to as the agile governance model. and putting it in the context of universities that are facing the disruptive effect of COVID-19 positively with confidence. What is the level of readiness? What is the level of preemption? And these type of characteristics that are worthy of noting, and whether you have observed them in practice. Because very often universities are accused or criticized for being far, far too reactive and not really designing strategies with the uncertainty or with the future in mind. So the focus is on readiness, your evaluation, your experience, and the preemption, the dynamicity of making decisions, not in a structured manner only, but in an insight-based, if you like, perspective, and navigating with the knowledge about what's going on in the external environment. That is really where the question is. So, Professor Hamza, over to you. Unmute yourself, please, Professor.
We are living in times where we have, in addition to the pandemic crisis, we have the fourth industrial revolution, we have socioeconomic changes, we have climate change, we have many things that are happening at the same time. So we're just not the pandemic. So a university or an agile governance model has to consider all these things. Like I said maybe a little while ago, that during this crisis, the university should have the capacity of systems to absorb disturbance, recover from disruptions, and adapt to changing conditions while retaining essentially the same function of a university as it was before COVID-19. And here is the role of the leadership. Should provide leadership with the clearly articulated goals. We have to mitigate the risk and to engage I was talking about the private sector, and it's important to increase stakeholders management. This is all is needed really to have this agile governance. Now, coordinating at the top level management is very important to manage the interest of all stakeholders. Understanding complex interdisciplines, independencies and vulnerabilities across infrastructure system to prioritize resilience efforts. Establishing a trust between top managers and operators by securing risk-related information sharing, building partnership to agree on common vision and achievable resilience objectives, ensuring accountability and monitoring implementation of a critical infrastructure resilience, internship, a practical course, all these things that we need to take care of. So I'll just stop here, and maybe we continue as we go along.
Professor Hamza, may I extend the same question to Henry, please?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I'll keep it short here. I'm a tremendous believer of shared governance, believer of collaboration. And I'm using that broadly across whether it's higher education or industry or government, whatever format the board or the organization is focused in. Collaboration is critical, and in this case, shared governance, which is my word of synonymous with collaboration, although it means a lot more than just collaborating. I realize that, and it's very nuanced. But to me, I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago around trust as a strategic asset. And when I think about what the board does and what it can do and should do, and what the president and the faculty and the administration, what everybody's doing, the outcome, or one of the outcomes, is establishing trust with their constituents. And so when I think about how entities do that, one of them is around listening, acknowledging, and sharing their views. And I'm not here to be a therapist around, now listen to your constituents, but that's where it breaks down frequently, is that entities, whether it's the board, the leadership team, the faculty, or whomever, A, doesn't listen, and the other side doesn't feel like they've been listened to, and they haven't been, and they don't acknowledge one another. So to me, even though we're in a crisis and we need to work fast, and I realize that fast may not be a historical norm of higher education around the world, and that we're working to it, we have to work fast and listen, acknowledge, share, and embrace shared governance, because if we work fast and not acknowledge others and not leverage shared governance, we're going to make decisions, or the board and the leadership team are likely to make decisions that A, are not well informed, B, are not understood by others, and C, will not be implemented and carried out in the way that we need to. So those are my thoughts, Dr. Zari. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hani. Now, the sub-question, which is about adaptive governance approach. I think this is an important question, because very often we believe that agility is about putting everything that exists aside and starting with a blank sheet of paper. That is not necessarily the case. So the subdivision was to seek the views of our esteemed panel as to what I call the proactive approach, which is, how do you move forward? How do you deal with crisis? What change do you need to induce? But the adaptive side is also very important. So we don't throw the baby with the bathwater. Institutions are not that bad overall. I think one of my colleagues used to say to me, where is the balance, basically? How much adaptiveness we need to really do in order to preserve what is good about us, what is robust about us. That is significant. And how much do we need to transform or disrupt? And so the second part is the most important one, which is about the adaptive governance approach. So in order to be reactive by, if you like, putting to work, putting into action what already exists, what are the most important governance aspects that can or have helped institutions of higher education deal with this radical disruptive change and adapt to, the new normal, basically by stabilizing and delivering with minimum disruptive negative effect. So I will start with Professor Al-Hashmi.
This is a fundamental question, and thank you so much for really focusing this discussion about it. In order for institutions and boards in general really to be adaptable, I think one key aspect of being also proactive is the ability to be creative and innovator. And this has to come with the risk-taking aspect of it. If we are afraid to take risks, we will not be able really to be proactive. And I think this is a fundamental for any institution. And I'm very proud to belong to a university that is defining itself as an innovation university. So that's key. Talking about this fundamental question, at our university, as I mentioned, we have a bicameral structure with a board of governors and a university senate. Cooperation in this case and support of the board and senate have been key in responding to the challenges of this time. And here I bring the aspect of alignment. If you have two governing bodies and they're not aligned, forget about it. So I think the alignment is very important. And in this case, we have actually fostered this collaboration by keeping our board and senate advised of changes and development. And I would say in this case, the role of the president, in our case, I'm the only person who is between the two. I'm the chair of Senate and same time I'm a member of the board. I think the bridge has to be really very smooth. And this is the role of the leadership of the university. The other aspect, the ability to continue to run effective board and Senate meetings online has also helped in making substantial changes in response to the pandemic. I think Henry mentioned the number of board meetings. I think that was also a very good response, the ability of running those meetings online. We have never done that before, and this is part of our response to the pandemic. Another key part of the teamwork has been the leadership of our executive group here. All of us came together in a very cohesive and focused way to support our students, faculty, staff, and also the operation of the universities. That's also fundamental. What also helped is having an existing campus culture of, as I said, flexibility, of adaptability, or creativity and innovation at our university. And lastly, we have maintained a regular and transparent communication with all stakeholders. And I would say here, the importance of communication is in both ways. It's not just sharing information with the stakeholders, it's also getting their feedback. And I think the leadership here of the university or the board is making sure that we listen. And I heard from our colleagues here the importance of listening. And this is fundamental if we want to have a trust. And Henry mentioned it's really an important aspect. Without engagement and without listening and without working together, we cannot establish a trust, and trust is fundamental here. And I will stop.
Very much, Professor Hashmi. And now I'll ask Professor Ahmed Bawa to give us your perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Zairi. And it's been a fascinating discussion, I have to say. So, irrespective of whether universities have been working at adaptiveness and kind of working with kind of new agility and so on, the impact of COVID-19 is just of a completely different magnitude. It's something that we could never have imagined, So I think that your question about the adaptive approach is really a critical one, because even if there were universities that were gearing themselves for kind of this new technology moment that we are in, the new labor market situation and so on, even then, I mean, the extent of the impact of COVID-19 is just massive. And there are two major issues. The one is the issue of uncertainty. Just the fact that we had no idea how this pandemic was going to play itself out. By the way, we still don't know how this pandemic is going to play itself out. On the other side, it's just the complexity of it, just the massive kind of interweaving of different influences in the system, if you like, here. And therefore, this idea that you really had to produce a kind of very quickly produce new approaches to the governance model was serious. So I'd like to reflect on a few of them. The first one is just clearly the idea that there was still a need for decisive leadership. Just the idea that actually leaders had to be upfront, they had to be strong, they had to provide clear indications of how they were going to kind of lead the institutions during this period. The second was the idea of developing broad-based kind of coordinating structures within the universities. Just the idea that you had to have multiple voices kind of coming together, if you like, at different levels, coming together to address the big challenges. And it harks back to the issue of listening. It harks to the issue of kind of getting buy-in, building consensus, and so on. The third issue, and a critical issue, was keeping the Senate at the center of the academic project. Simply because, if you adopted any kind of shortcuts with regard to the academic project, that would have serious long-term consequences. So keeping the Senate at the center is critical. But at the same time, understanding that there was a massive need for decentralizing to ensure that there's higher levels of innovation. So there are all these kind of contending forces, if you like, and hence the need for the strong leadership, if you like. I'll just make two more points. So the first one was of the two was just this idea that you had to have really sound, flexible communication strategies, because there was a need for constant communication, constant buy-in, and so on. And then finally, it was galvanizing the university to respond to the challenges of COVID-19. I mean, societally. So in other words, saying that there was also a need for universities to achieve buy-in from the broad community, from government and so on, for them to see that the universities were galvanizing their capacities to address the challenges of COVID-19. And by the way, the universities have done brilliantly in that regard, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Bawa. We'll just take a little pause again and have our second question for the audience. And the second question is really about the role of governing boards in order to help presidents and leaders of the institutions of higher education deal with the crisis. And there are four options as answers. One is the role of the board, particularly the chair, on a one-to-one relationship with the presidents of the university to really tackle this in partnership, not through instructions or directive kind of approach, but really to look at it as a common concern. The second one is whether the better option is collaboratively to review and refine the institution's mission, values, and strategies. I think we've heard Professor Al-Hashmi answer this, but we still put it as an option to the audience. The third option is whether the best way for the board is to help by focusing on segments to attract, retain, and graduate, and consolidate, optimize, and deliver, or whether the last option is to bolster the trustees' understanding of the key principles of strategic board leadership. Again, it's about engagement, and it's about making sure that there is a consensus, because these are unprecedented times. It's not the directive approach that is going to give the best answer, but it's really about having collective input and the alignment and the consensus. So we'll just give a few seconds to the audience to choose their option. And then I will invite brief comments from our esteemed panel. Well, there you are. It looks like option 2, which is to work collaboratively in a seamless manner, the governing board and the leadership team within the university to review, refine the mission, revisit the values and the strategy. I think the last one has somewhat 21% support, which is to really have the wider engagement in order to create the consensus and apply the key principles of strategic board leadership. So may I invite Professor Ahmed Bawa just to give you a brief comment, please.
I think this was a tricky one, Chair. Yeah, I think we were really in a moment of crisis. So I think refining and reviewing the strategy and so on, there's just no time for that. Right? So if I were to vote on this one, I would have voted for the last one, really, which was to kind of bolster the board's capacity for strategic leadership and so on, and for them to understand, that there's a special role for them, and that they had to support the university administration and so on. So that would have been my choice, yes. But I can see it's a difficult one.
Thank you, Professor Bawa. And Dr. Al-Hashmi, please.
I would totally agree with Professor Baya that I think this will depend on which angle you look at the aspects. I think all the four possibilities are important. From my own perspective, the relationship and the partnership between the chair of the board and the president, because I am president, I think that's a very important one. I also agree with Dr. Baya. It's not time really to revisit values and refine them. I think it's time to take actions based on the values. Each institution has values and strategic plans in place. This is a time really to show to the community that we do have those values, and let's put them in action.
Thank you, Prof. Hashmi. Henry, over to you, please.
You know, if there was an option D on the E on the answers, all of the above, I think that would be appropriate, because it's hard to say, you know, boards should do this one thing. On the prior questions, I think there's definitely skews, but in this one, I think all are appropriate. You heard me talk about the importance of collaboration in the prior question, which is kind of around the mission and strategy, things of that nature. So I think they're all important to me. Somebody asked me a question: what is the most important asset an institution has? And I personally believe that a strategic governing board is the most important asset that an institution has, because a strategic governing board can help overcome shortfalls in many different areas. And so, like, answer A was around reinforcing the importance of the board chair and the board president relationship, which is absolutely critical. It's kind of like, if you're only going to do one thing, make sure you do that, because the relationship between the board and the chair has to be so strong. But at the end of the day, Professor Zari, I think all of those are important. The board chair relationship, the board chair president relationship, collaboration and around strategy and mission, and the other two as well. So thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Henry. And lastly, I would like to invite Professor Hamza, please.
Thank you. Well, I agree with my colleagues. It is very difficult to say, let's focus on the one aspect and try to execute one part of the strategy, but a strategy with clear values, I think it can be executed. We have to work on everything at the same time, especially under emergency, time. So I think all of that is correct, and it is very difficult to separate and say, let's just focus on these aspects and not those. So all are correct, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Hamza. We will now move to the third question. I am conscious that we have consumed a large portion of our time, but I am keen, and I'm sure that the panel is also keen, for us to go through all the questions and tackle some of the QA questions as well. So the third question is now moving from being reactive to basically rethinking governance in times of uncertainty. And we have two options to consider here. The first option, I will invite Professor Bawa and Professor Hamza to give short answers to, is very much about the governance blueprints for the future. What would it look like? Imagineering, if you like. And the second one, I will invite Henry and Professor Hashmi to answer, is governance in the context of something I really am keen on and have done a lot of work on, which is this new phenomenon of operating institutions as open ecosystems. So let's first of all consider the blueprints, the ideas that are being floated around for an effective governance model that is to be rather than that exists. So we are looking at post-COVID-19, something that is fit for the new purpose of delivering higher education in the digital age of the future. So Professor Bauer, please, over to you.
Thank you again, Professor Zairi. And just to begin with, to say that I feel so envious of Professor Hamza and Bahrain, where the penetration is sort of 99% of the digital internet and so on, whereas in South Africa, we're just nowhere near there. But just to say that it seems to me, at least, that one of the things that we could begin to think about really is this understanding that this new context in which we are in is going to require universities to see themselves as part of an ecosystem, as part of an open system, rather than to see themselves as kind of institutions, kind of making deals with individual companies and so on, but rather seeing themselves as a part of an ecosystem. Now, of course, that has huge implications for the issue of governance, because what it does mean is that you really are beginning to kind of reimagine the whole issue around institutional autonomy and so on, in the context that you are engaging with many more external and depending on external partners. So let me give you one example. You have to have a national cyber infrastructure system in place if you want to begin to shift decisively into that kind of system. And what that means essentially is that you have to work very closely with government. You have to work very closely with data companies and so on. So that's the one issue. It's the issue around universities collaborating much more with external parties and depending on external parties for their core business. So that's something which is quite tricky and requires new forms of governance which alleviate the challenges, if you like, of breakdown and so on. The second is just this idea again of trying to ensure that you do not what's the word, that you do not emphasize existing or deepen existing inequalities and so on. So there has to be a social justice kind of framework that's adopted by the board, that you, from the very outset, that you have to think quite hard about how you ensure that you're not going to, that such a model does not kind of leave out certain groups of students or place students at disadvantage and so on. The third, and perhaps the trickiest one of all, is just this idea that that universities, in moving towards this kind of model, continue to play the vital role that they play in ensuring that that they continue to build engaged citizens, that they continue to produce graduates who can become organic intellectuals and so on. So just this idea that it's that moving over to a digital system does not mean giving up on the key issues, the key roles of universities in building nations or building global citizens, or all those very important roles that are played. So that brings it all back to the Senate, if you like, and to try and ensure that the Senates are in this very tricky moment, that the Senates are very integrally involved in shaping these new this new environment in which technology systems are being deployed. And finally, it's just this this idea of trying to ensure that as we move into this new era, that we don't simply get rid of the huge advantages of having students engage with each other on campus. So I think it's a kind of this idea that as we move forward, we also have to ensure that the traditional roles of universities are not weakened, if you like, that they are strengthened, and to try and understand how to bring those together. So placing Senate at the center seems to me to be of fundamental value here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Ahmed. And now I ask Professor Hamza to briefly give us your perspective, please.
Well, when we talk about governance blueprints for the digital future, or would be an effective governance model look like post-COVID-19 and fit for the new purpose of delivering higher education in the digital age. It is very important using digital technologies powered by artificial intelligence, big data, to cut through this major information problem. Built-in flexibilities to enable and to undertake targeted engagement and gather crucial information in future crisis situation, study, exam policies, internship policies, and so on. It's important to identify appropriate analytical tools to assist higher education institutions in assessing the trade-offs between economy and the social impacts. We believe that the university, that we can be stronger together as the world has become more closely interconnected. Coordinating higher education policies will make a crisis response definitely more effective. Home is the new labor center, and home is the new learning center. And we believe that at the University of Bahrain, that the alternative is University 2.0. University 2.0 is an online learning platform amplifying learning interaction and facilitating knowledge-based learning activities, and where academic programs lead to the fourth industrial jobs of tomorrow's that support the UN Sustainable Development Goals. This is the future of higher education, and this what we at the University of Bahrain aims to be in the nearest future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Hamza. Now, the second part is very much about this emerging theme of managing institutions of higher education as open ecosystem. And that takes us to really redesigning, reimagining governance models for the future. As I said before, fit for not the existing purpose, but fit for the new purpose, which is to operate institutions of higher education in the digital era. So I would like to invite Professor Hashmi briefly to tell us what would the blueprint for an emerging governance model for the fit for the new purpose look like?
Thank you very much. I would say the pandemic has shown us just how much everything is interconnected. As higher education institutions, what we do will have a major impact on society, not just with recovery, but everything else as well. As a sector, I think it's important for us to rethink delivery modes. I would say that lectures are 15th century invention. It's about time to rethink the mode of education. There are opportunities to rethink learning and teaching for more modern, effective, creative, perhaps less costly, but also widely accessible education. I think that's the important aspect that we can benefit from this pandemic. It took a pandemic for us to wake up and really think about the future of education. We have been trying to make small changes to an old system. I would say that with the pandemic, we can make a big shift. Students are the most powerful tools to transform schools, universities, if we let them to help us. And I would say this is my advice to governing bodies. You know, education, students must be at the center of that. And if we don't listen to them, if we don't give them opportunities to give us some ideas, we will never change. And we have to trust our students to tell us the best way to learn. And the way that I learn is very different from the way that my kids are learning. I see them learning in a very different way because of technology, but also because of connectivity. And I think that's important for us. So that's one change. Second, the pandemic has put increasing spotlight on human rights issues. It has highlighted systemic inequalities and raised the alarm for change. Despite everything else going on, universities must be leaders in fostering equity and equality. I think that's the most important thing that we can learn. As education becomes increasingly digitalized, there are more also concerns about deepening inequalities. And I would say we have a responsibility to create a more equitable, inclusive, diverse higher education sector. And I would say also that institutions have already begun this difficult but necessary work. And together, I believe we can transform the sector, but also we can have a very positive impact on our societies.
Professor Zary, I think you are frozen.
Maybe Henry, you can
Okay,
continue.
I'll fill in the gap here. So when I think about a potential, the question around, is it a new governance model needed or anything like that? I actually don't think a new model is needed. I think new attitudes, new expectations, and new behaviors are expected. That's just my view. And I guess I think of that because I don't want people to think that there's a whole nother new that's required on top of this whole new world of creating and delivering fantastic academic programming. That certainly is creating enough strain on the system. So I think, so focusing on academic quality is job number one. Focusing on access. Can people get to that academic quality in an efficient and an effective way? I know from firsthand experiences that is not the case because for many, I should say, because many come from places where they don't have internet, they don't have a peaceful surrounding to kind of focus in on their educational experience and then on their learning. So that is just as challenging because unfortunately that's not something that we typically can control. Even if we said, okay, here's a computer, here's bandwidth, they may not be able to get it. So anyway, I think the model we have is good, and I'm not going to go down the path I was said earlier around collaboration, because at the end of the day, I believe the board needs to work with the leadership team. The leadership team drives the strategy, but the board needs to engage, and that's what I believe hasn't happened as much in some situations, as opposed to the management team saying, here board, here's our strategy, what do you think? And the board says, okay, good, go. And that really should take at least 6 months, preferably at least a year of collaborative work between the board and the leadership team to develop that strategy. And I guess the third part would be to step back and think about the mission. Many institutions, I believe, try to accomplish too much. And I know in a perfect world, if we could do everything, we would provide a world-class academic experience for everyone who would want to come to our campuses. But unfortunately, due to travel, financial issues, health, obviously, issues, we cannot support everyone and every type of academic curriculum. So what that means is that we have to focus, and that comes back to the board on helping the management team, the leadership team, realizing what are we world-class at? That's a really hard question because you cannot be world-class at everything. So prioritizing what are we really good at and let's double down. Should we kind of emphasize on what we're really good at, and then potentially, unfortunately, having to say we don't have the resources, and have compassion to that faculty, staff, and whatnot. If we get down the list and say we personally don't have, or organizationally don't have the financial capacity to support that curriculum right now, it's unfortunate, but you have to make some hard decisions around the long-term vitality of your institution and student success.
My apologies, I disappeared for a little while. That is one of the challenges of technology. Unfortunately, we seem to be running out of time. However, I'm pleased to say that question number 4, or the aim number 4, has been addressed in great detail by esteemed members of the panel. And also, I tried to capture as many questions as possible and formulated a set of answers with different words, if you allow me, but capturing the wisdom that was flying from the 4 members of our esteemed panel. So let's just now try to conclude the agenda for today. And I hope that Dr. Nariman and colleagues at CLIX would take this as the start of a reoccurring debate of leaders, particularly on issues of governance, because I don't think that with so many challenging questions, 90 minutes would have been sufficient and appropriate. So let's take this as just one step of many things to come in the future. So allow me, dear colleagues, just to summarize, and I captured 10 points, and including the questions that you have answered in different ways from the audience. The first thing that I came across, whether it is, if you like, looking at the aspects of managing governing boards, or whether it's to do with the linkages in supporting presidents of universities, whatever. The key words that keep coming across is what I call the leadership of conviction. So the leadership of conviction is also something that we refer to as gutsy leadership. The reason why, as Professor Bauer was saying, put the Senate at the center in decisions, in considerations, in inclusion, in engagement, is very much to put leadership into account. And leadership should be an extension to have a seamless relationship between the board and the institution's leadership team. So leadership of conviction, or gutsy leadership, is what has made a difference in so many successful cases dealing with the challenge. The second thing, and including the last comment from Henry, the compassion thing, and I think we heard it from Professor Bauer, we heard it from Professor Hamza, and also Professor Al-Hashmi. I use the word that I love so very much, the word empathy. I think empathy has made a difference, has made everybody become aware as to the loss to the students' experience, the loss to faculty and how they are mentally stretched and challenged, emotionally overwhelmed, trying to do a job in difficult conditions. And I think we will see this as an emerging characteristic of institutions of learning that really display the values and what it takes to move forward. The third thing, and I referred a little bit to this in my opening remarks, is human ingenuity. I think technology is only an enabler. I think it will be a fallacy to assume that institutions that are going to invest in digital platforms are the ones who are going to be successful. I think the competitive advantage ultimately will come from the people that we employ, the work environment, the motivational aspect, the level of engagement. And we heard so much today about that. So I think human ingenuity. The fourth aspect, I think all of you referred to this, is the spirit of collaboration and partnerships. It is important for any institutions of higher education to continue operating, if you like, as a black box, as a closed system, as a white elephant, basically, you know. So it's important now to break the walls, extend the connectivity, engage the private sector, build different types of relationships, and digitality allows us to do this now. The third thing, I think, is more psychological. Many universities have been accused of being arrogant, standing an arrogant attitude. We know everything. We are the ones who can suggest ideas. And maybe the practice of humility in times of crisis, like we heard it from CEOs, we even heard it from presidents of countries saying, we need help. And it wasn't, if you like, begging, it was really protecting people. And many countries have reached out to other countries to help them with, if you like, masks, you know, with PPE equipment, whatever. Humility is the best form of leadership in times of crisis. Extending the message for asking for help, opening doors for others to collaborate and be involved. So I think that we will see more of that, and I think it's a good criteria. The sixth point is about the power of digital as a key enabler. I don't think there is something, let's go back to classroom-based, face-to-face. I think it will be blended models at the very, very least. I think technology is here to stay. It has started to modify. People started to recognize the value that it brings in terms of operational benefits, in terms of efficiency benefits. More importantly, one of the questions from the audience was about quality, whether if we compare online virtual learning with classroom-based learning, we have lost quality or we have gained quality. Being biased, I would say that it's all about gain if we know how to apply it in the right way. We heard a lot about engagement. I think this will be the recipe of success for the future. An excellent institution of higher education is one that has an excellent climate, working climate, an excellent culture. That is where we need to really, you know, I like watermelon, and I think that if you open a watermelon, the first thing you taste is really the heart of the melon. If it is sweet, that you know you've done a good job in choosing the right time. So I think engagement to unleash potential for innovation, for happiness, for well-being, for collegialism, for teamwork, for building a reservoir of knowledge, for so many things. The next point, number 8, as Dr. Deming used to say, survival is not compulsory. I think we need to cease as leaders to think that building the right university of the future is building durable, the word durable university. That is a distraction. I think longevity should not be the obsession of presidents and boards. Relevance should be the obsession. So you could have 200 years of history, but you could be highly irrelevant. You could be an emerging institutions of learning, an accelerator, but you could have very high relevance. What many universities have lost over time is relevance because they were preserving longevity. Longevity is not a brick and mortar. It's not really what served us well in the past. It's really about being fit for the purpose. And even if the purpose needs to be redefined, we continue to say fit for the new purpose. Number 9, we need to be careful as leaders that we don't become subservient of technology, but rather we need to learn the mastery of digital disruptive technology. This is very important because technology will always be an enabler. the focus should be on human capital. A university that is well differentiated, that can compete, is one that has the best faculty, the best support staff, and has the means by which it can give the best experience to its population of students. And the last point is the investment. And the boards, really, this is a big message for boards. When we think about automation, or digitization, we should think about the parallel word, which is augmentation. The reason why many universities fell behind is because they really focused too much on modernization through digitization and creating the right infrastructure, but they forgot that the human skills needed to be upgraded and the skills for the future. And I looked personally at many strategies of universities around the world, and they did not sign anything about upskilling or building the skills for the future. And this is where the crisis has appeared. You know, the mental health of faculty, the challenges, whether it's emotional, psychological, is because they could not cope with advanced technologies, not because they are stupid or they are not enabled. It's because they have not been prepared for this. So I think the university of the future will have to really think about augmentation alongside automation. So I think with this, if you allow me, dear colleagues, to bring things to the close, on behalf of CLIX and on my behalf, I really enjoyed this debate, and I hope we can have the opportunity to further scrutinize the different aspects of the role of boards and the role of leaders in shaping the future of higher education. Thank you for your contribution. Thank you for the insight that you brought in today. Thank you to our audience for being patient with us, and also for their presence. And thank you to CLIX for hosting this important event. Wishing you all the very best. Please stay healthy and safe, and Harry, good luck with the elections. We are looking very closely and looking forward to working with you again in the future. Thank you very much, and all the best of luck.
May I also
thank you all.
Thank you. May I also take this opportunity to thank our chair and all our panelists, as well as our participants, whether they're watching us on YouTube, on the Voice of Higher Education, or here. The link to the panel will be made available by tomorrow morning, so you can share it with other colleagues, so that it can reach as many people as possible. I thank you all, and I look forward to seeing you for our next panel that will soon be announced. And the panel, based on the feedback that we received from our participants, will be around student mental health and well-being in the era of COVID-19. So we will see you next month, inshallah. Stay safe and have a pleasant evening or day, wherever you are located. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all, colleagues. And thank you,
you.
Dr. Zairi. You did an excellent job. Your summary was really good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Have a good day.